What's up and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to talk about how Borderlands 2 set the bar way too high. A game that was released all the way back in 2012, I don't think many of us knew just how revolutionary it was going to be. Selling an impressive 28 million copies compared to the first Borderlands game, which only sold 6. I think it's fair to say Gearbox didn't have a clue that this game was going to be this big either, which is exactly why they try and remind us that they made this game at any chance that they get. Like Jack coming back 19 times, or them creating Wonderlands just because they crafted a decent DLC back in BL2, which is a whole other can of worms. I already did a video talking about Wonderlands 2, and if you want to watch that, I will go ahead and leave it in the top of the description. But I have to mention some of those more recent projects briefly, as they're a reason we've continued to go back to BL2. Because quite frankly, ever since Borderlands 2, the franchise has only gone one place.
That reminds me, I haven't adjusted this one yet.
Can't see. Down.
And while I can get enjoyment out of pre-sack as well as the original Tales, they never quite hit that Borderlands 2 level. To make this video easy to digest, I'm going to break it down into 5 main chapters. So without further ado, no better place to start than the beginning. Chapter 1, the story. Let's go ahead and knock out the obvious one. The story of Borderlands 2 is by a landslide the best that we've seen in the franchise, and I think I could have made this entire video without mentioning it, and no one would have batted an eye, because it's just a widely known fact by this point that Borderlands 2 nailed the story down better than any other game that we've seen in the series. Now, why is this important? Borderlands games are not like most story campaigns. Players are expected to play through the game multiple times in order to get the most out of it. BL2 having the best paced and well thought out story makes it the most digestible and enjoyable by a landslide. While Tales and Wonderlands have passable stories, they still don't come close to the magic of this one. Borderlands 3 on the other hand, talk to Lilith. The end. Look, my point is, after Borderlands 2, the Borderlands story has never really got back on track. And while I think that the pre-sequel story is solid, it is a prequel to the Borderlands 2 story. After the events of Borderlands 2, for whatever reason, they have never managed to recover. While I think the pre-sequel has a solid story, it suffers from a lot of dragged out sections to pad out the runtime, with some story missions literally taking 40 minutes or more. BL2 is a game that is very popular for speedrunners and casual players because it can be completed very quickly with enough situational awareness and skill. Or you could just breeze through in a casual 7 to 9 hours and just enjoy yourself. Well, you see, Borderlands 3 presents an issue here, with its main story alone being 23 hours long. This is just simply too much to ask for a player to repeat on multiple characters. So most didn't, and I can't say I blame them, because I was one of these people. The villains have never gotten any better either, which is exactly why they've brought Handsome Jack back so many times. The progression, world building, and even side characters all the way up to your main cast. I could go on about it all day, but I think most of you have just about heard it all by this point. Chapter 2, the loot. One of my personal favorite aspects of this game that I'll eventually get around to making a solo video on. In short, 90% of the unique gear has a dedicated loot source with around 10% chance to drop on average. Some gear has higher odds than others, but on average I find that the drop rates are not only fair, but rewarding. Unlike later entries where guns are quite literally dropped at your feet like a kid with toys on the floor. You then have the unique variety of weapons at your disposal, which compared to any other looter shooter, Borderlands has them all beat by about 1,000 miles. No shooter on the market will give you as many options as these games will. And Borderlands 2 has no shortage of guns. Believe me when I say that. So to wrap up this chapter, I'd just like to say that it's not only super rewarding when you get what you're looking for, or that new upgrade to a weapon that you had, mixed with something that we're getting ready to talk about in the next portion, and made for the perfect storm that the progression system needed in this game. Chapter 3, the bosses. Like I said, this ties directly into the loot and farming aspect of the last chapter. But man, the vast amount of bosses in this game is genuinely insane for a first-person shooter. Whether it's raid bosses, mini bosses, big ass story bosses that actually feel important, with about 80% of them having loot tied to them. From the very first story boss kill, you have a chance to get a legendary pistol, all the way up to the final boss in the game, who has a chance to drop many different legendaries, and is damn near guaranteed to give you one on your story kill. This is how progression should be. The beginning has you start with commons, with a small chance to get a legendary from the bosses you kill along the way, whether it be side mission encounters or the ones through the main campaign. Where Borderlands 3 went wrong was not having dedicated loot tied to their bosses, and then attempting to fix it by having mini bosses with way too many dedicated drops in their loot pool, over polluting the loot pools and devaluing one of the community's favorite features. The bosses and loot connected to them are a huge reason so many of us come back to Borderlands 2, and them doing this to damn near perfection and failing in the sequels has done nothing but hurt the faith that we once had in these games. They set themselves up for success with 2 and fell on their face with the pre-sequel, when most bosses didn't respawn or didn't have anything to farm. It's these components being missing from the game on launch that really hurt it in the long run. Because first impressions are important. If it's not an enjoyable experience, you won't even make it to our next section on the list. Chapter 4, the Endgame. And everything I've just talked about kind of ties into this one. The loot, the bosses, and the third story playthrough in UVHM are all a part of BL2's endgame, as the player will have to farm their gear from the bosses and the story one more time in the ultimate difficulty. After reaching level 80, you have reached the max level. You then get the option of doing the overpowered levels, which will be your 10 raids of Digistruct Peak. While I personally would have preferred them to just have stayed at OP 8 as their max overpowered level, I didn't get the choice, so 10 OP levels is what we're left with. Regardless, I believe that the journey to max level is what makes this game so enjoyable. Turning a level 1 character into a Pandora mopping monster is one of the most satisfying experiences I've ever had in a video game. Whether it's Axton or Zero, Maya or Krieg, Salvador or Gage, I love building these characters. While some are weaker than others, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses, you can turn all 6 playable characters into viable options in the late game. Which yes, some of the later titles have nailed the Vault Hunters and their skill trees. I'd argue none are as memorable as the BL2 crew. You have 10 raid bosses to fight, perfect variants of the weapons that are difficult to farm but don't give you a migraine with the amount of anointments that can roll, and mini bosses and more to get solid gear from. It's a good progression loop and no one else can convince me otherwise. Which brings me to Chapter 5, You. While it may sound stupid or strange to hear, every single person on the other side of that screen is a reason why this game has set the bar too high. Because we know how damn good this game is. We know what makes it so special to us. And if I forgot anything, please let me know what it is in the comments below. Us fans hold this game in such high regard because we want to have another game like it. But nothing has been able to itch that BL2 itch. Gearbox has continued to give us less content for the same, if not more money. Because they realized that they gave us way too much with Borderlands 2. Still trying so desperately to recreate the magic till this very day and live up to the bar that it set. But because of us and our acknowledgement of this being the premier looter shooter, we may never see Gearbox push this bar. But that's my thoughts for today, guys. I really do hope you all did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to smash a like on it and subscribe if you guys are new. Like I said, I'd love to hear any other points as to how this game set the bar too high, as I myself can admit that this game is so damn good, I may have forgot something. But yeah, guys, that's really it for me today. I love you all to death, and I want you to take it easy out there, stay safe, and with that, I will see you all in the next one.